I'm Victoria Cordova. I'm the co-director of the Latin America Global Studies Program in Mexico City. And it is my pleasure to welcome this evening Tatiana Bilbao Summer. Tatiana Bilbao Studio celebrates this year its 20th anniversary since its 2004 founding in Mexico City. The studio's well-known projects range from urban master plans to affordable housing strategies, city planning to furniture design. A major stated goal of Tatiana's work is to contribute to its surrounding while remaining flexible to absorb the shifting needs, pursuing architecture through deliberately multidisciplinary perspectives, which Tatiana undertakes in a studio with a very, very diverse staff of architects, academics, and model makers. These people work together in collaborations that extend beyond the studio to include other architects, artists, economists, local governments, and other participants. All of them work together to enrich the impact and reach of each project. This intensive collaboratively working method of the studio is as distinctive in contemporary architecture today as are the build projects, and itself an incredible sustained critique of much contemporary architectural practice and the profession as is. The office's deliberate use of hand drawing and iterative handmade models, which are primary tools of design, and are of working that deliberately keep the design rooted in spatial and not digital forms of thinking, learning, and exploration. That's all about how the studio works. From that have come Tatiana and the studio's well-known impactful buildings and projects. These include Estoa, an award-winning institutional building on the Bilbao campus, the Culiacan's Botanical Garden, a pilgrimage route in Jalisco, large planning and design projects that contrast, for example, with an indigenous social housing prototype displayed at the 2015 Chicago Biennale. This project was created at a cost less than $8,000. There are many other projects demonstrating the incredible breadth of interest and ideas of the studio, which has now completed 3 phases of building for a housing project in Lyon-La Confluence, an incredible research center of the Sea of Cortez on Mazatlan, more like a campus of integrated landscapes and buildings. And more recently, here in the US, the Mexican-American culture in Austin, Texas, and there are many others. In addition to considerable amounts of building, Tatiana's work is known for many international exhibitions, lectures, and public presentations of the work of the studio. Just a few of these include 2019's exhibition of the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, recent exhibitions at the Graham Foundation and the Chicago Architectural Biennale and SF MoMA in San Francisco and all in North America. In Europe, the Venice Biennale, the Architekturzentrum in Vienna, the Aretes Architekturforum in Berlin, the Danish Architecture Center, and the Pompidou in Paris. Tatiana Bilbao's studio achievements and growing influence are many, and include especially its commitment to the work of local communities, and the elevating of so-called ordinary and everyday programs and sites to become occasions of disciplined and rigorous elegance and beauty. Through all of this work, Tatiana's focus since the outset of her career has been on the essentially human aspect of architecture. As she wrote near the outset of her career in a book titled "A House is Not Just a House," we cannot forget that housing is a human right. Please join me in welcoming Tatiana Bilbao Summer in person.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, USC Architecture, for being here tonight in such a way. Thank you. I don't know if the people standing in the back want to come. I think there's people sitting in the corridors. I think it's quite nice. It's better than standing there if you want to. I guess in that window there's more space. I hope you're fine. Thank you. Okay. So there's a little bit of a technical trick at the beginning. Let's do these.
Could you guys try to make it louder, please?
Yeah, that's okay. Here we go. Okay, we're gonna, sorry. Eight years ago, I got a call from Patrick Hillian, a Cistercian monk of an abbey of Heiligenkreuz in Austria, asking me if I would help them to build a new monastery for them. I very soon after realized that a Cistercian monastery is the ultimate domestic space. Don't worry, I'm not here to convince you that we should all become monks. So we started understanding what is a Cistercian monastery, and we immediately understood that there is the only typology I've ever encountered that really is designed to hold physical bodies to exist in order to live this spiritual life. It's a building that sustains every aspect of the physical body of one person or a group of them in order to be able to allow them to live this spiritual life that they are endeavoring in living in. Actually, that's why monasteries were founded. They understood that to be able to exist, they do have to invest in their intimate possibility of their existence, meaning their own individual body, but it cannot be so if it's not with the other. We are humans, human beings that are probably one of many interdependent species in the world, and we really need the other to exist. If we understand that, first of all, if we're not paired inside another person's body, and we understand it as a level of independency that is even vital for our existence, we really can comprehend the monastery and its type very profoundly. So it's a system that is designed not only that really is able to not conduct, but hold a body in a space within its physical necessities with a rhythm that it also corresponds to the rhythm of the day and the rhythm of the day of the year, meaning the season in which that body is being held. It is really a space that is pretending to be auto-sustainable, so meaning that every activity that is held within its complex is aiming and willing to sustain this community without the dependency on the rest. But I said the dependency on the community, and this is the core of the space. I'm not going to go very deep into our process of design because it's really been 8 years and I could talk about it for 8 years. Because it is a very determined and determined space that has its specific architecture, which our very big challenge was only to interpret and to understand how to build a monastery on a Cistercian monastery, respecting the tradition, because of course we're not going to change a tradition that happened from 10 centuries ago, in order to and understand what to do in the 21st century. So, but I think that there are two major lessons. This project kind of fell in the process of our office in the moment where we were really making a profound reflection that comes from the beginning of the career, thinking that we needed to work on the essential part of life, which is a space in we live in. With the monastery, but also, of course, much more by now, we understand that we live 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. So kind of one of the structural problems is that we think this division of life in between the places where we live and places where we work, and places where we create, and places where we are in collective environments, and places where we are in intimate environments. During all those times, we're living. So what is the space of living? What is that? And the monastery has really kind of made us do that reflection in full. But I think that the two major aspects that were direct kind of outputs on why I think it's the ultimate domestic space is really the notion of the architecture and its understanding on how to hold a body, not because of its functions, its needed functions, but because of the rituals that sustain those functions. Of course, this is a very specific typology that holds and only allows people who are performing this specific type of ritual. But if we think how the configuration of the monastery, it's been thought since the 6th century, you really understand that really the building is totally surrendered to only hold a body. Within this ritual, yes, but I don't know any other typology. And the orchestration of not the functions, because that's how we supposedly design every building today, but the notions, the possibilities, and the understandings on the necessities of holding a body with all its characteristics and rituals is what this building is surrendered to. A monastery is really the physical structure that is understanding, as I said again, how it holds a body. For the monks, the first architecture, it's the robe. And the robe, it is an identitarian space, of course, but it is the first layer of protection for a body in the planet. That body with the robe and its intimate possibilities held on the cell. And the cell, it's this intimate, unique space where only one person is allowed to exist. And then this cell is connected to the cloister. The cloister is the first point of encounter with the other, but the other intimate other, your brother or your sister in case of a female community that then is linked to the rest of the internal monastery where other members of the community also exist. Then the rest area of the monastery, the chapter room, the refectory, the library, etc., the paroirs, the offices, is then connected to the church. And the church is the place where there's the connection with the outer community. And the monks transition between the inner space and their interior, intimate body towards the outer community in different moments of the day in stages. So they're never exposed from their intimate space out of the community or the other way around. This is a Cistercian tradition. Not every monastery, not every order has the same rigorous kind of rhythm of life. But I think this allows the possibility of the creation of and the sustenance of a community in many regards. So holding one body and understanding its intimate individual necessities, but then understanding how to create these networks of relationships that hold it together, but in scales, is something that or we never understood or we've forgotten in life. No, we have since the Industrial Revolution have understood these places of rest as, first of all, the opposition between work, which for me already is the first friction and the first impossibility of the house in which we live today. Because as Fernanda Canales says in her introductory book for My House, My City, is the house as a place of rest, as if work would not happen there. First of all, remunerated economically work, as if it never happened there. It happens in probably 85% of the world, but except in urban cities and much more in northern countries. But also is the far most important place of work. This is where reproductive work happens. This is where the most vital labor that we need for our existence, it is happening. And that is the labor that the monastery recognizes as the sustenance space that needs to happen there, and that it's collectivized, that it's done specifically in communal areas, and that it's really sustained by a community and not by the individual. In our housing system, we fail to recognize this labor, reproductive labor, which is the labor that is vital for us to exist in this planet, is tucked in there, totally not recognized by the economy, the politics, or anything, and even called as an act of love. This labor is done 95% by women in the whole world and is individualized and is burdenized to one person that needs to hold the possibility of everybody else to exist and then therefore produce. The major friction, I believe, is that not only that our housing is promoting the city of production, and I will explain it a little bit more later. It's that our housing is really making impossible for this labor to become then a space of recognition. It's discriminating the majority by becoming not only the space where the most important labor and recognized labor is done, but also by being an asset, a commodity. Housing is a human right. But if this is part of the market system, it only is serving a purpose to capital, but it's expelling the majority of the people that is really supposed to attend. And the third friction is that this house also recognizes one form of social arrangement. A man and a woman with two children, hopefully they stay 8 and 10 years old because otherwise they don't fit anyway, as if that was the only social arrangement in society. If you are lucky enough to have grown in a house which has that social configuration, you were lucky probably that your parents were able, or you yourselves that were here, were able to find a house, because that's the 95% of the houses that are being built in the whole world and being designed, even sustained and maintained by the codes, by the law, etc., etc. But it's designed for only 15 years of your life or 18 years of your life. So there is really a vital necessity on all of us to think, why are we repeating this house that I think architects are absolutely culprit of reproducing without thinking? Is this really the architecture that the body needs to exist in this society? We have really kind of questioned these and realized it after doing many prototypes, and then realizing that prototypes is not a correct path, because one size fits all fits nobody. Then making a design strategy like this one also is not a correct approach, because again, by replicating the notions and understandings of the foundations of the type of house that we're trying to replicate, we're replicating the structures of power and discrimination that are expelling the majority of the population from the possibility of inhabiting any city. So, but mostly that we are repeating the patterns of the house that discriminates in full the women in this world and in this planet. As I said, right now, 95% of the reproductive labor is done by women, is not paid. But if we think in the equal moment where we arrive, where 50% of that labor is done by one gender and 50% of the other, well, this is not binary world, but let's think if it's done by everybody, it still would be a discriminative labor, because it's not paid and not recognized as a job. And if we only keep repeating this house that only allows one person to be cooking, one person to be washing, one person needing to clean, then we are really promoting and repeating this circle of discrimination. So we understood that also not only kind of replicating these promotes all those things, it also discriminates the majority again. Not only socially, we're not all the same, so we don't have the same social configuration. We don't all live in a couple, in an hetero couple with 2 children. Definitely, it's only 18% of the world. Nevertheless, the houses, again, are all designed for that type of social configuration. It's also that those 18% of the world that have an hetero couple, they don't come from the same culture. And in Mexico, it's very clear. Let's say the Mayan Peninsula, it's really inhabited by the Mayan culture. Those people do not live in this type of houses, because of they have developed a way of inhabiting this planet that responds directly to their culture, their history, their place, the humid, horrid temperatures of that place. And when they need to access a subsidy, a new house, etc., then this house is imposed to that way of living. And they have to change all their social configuration, their history, their cultural existence in this planet, not because of the Spanish arriving, because we, the architects, are arriving to build houses. So our kind of force transformed into think that if we are repeating this house that comes even from the language of production, that is promoting and holding the city of production, how can we then promote a different type of house that holds in its core bodies and that it's really promoting the city of care? we don't know what is the answer, but we understand that we need to create platforms for anybody to design and decide their own form of living. And we've been exploring that in many, many ways. No? So we have been trying to answer that question in every project in many different ways. But in every project, meaning not only spaces that are only designed for living, which I still, again, think that it's, but also, for example, let's say intimate spaces, but also spaces that are all of them, all the spaces that we are designing. So just at the onset of the pandemic, we won a competition in Paris to design 3 buildings. And that competition, which was part of the program Paris 2030, already carried on itself a really different ethos on how to think on these buildings. And these buildings had no program. So we didn't have buildings that were commercial or housing or whatever. They didn't have a program. So we needed to design flexible buildings, net zero buildings that would hold any possibility, a workshop, a house, a bed, and a space for work or whatever. And we won the competition. We haven't started the project. I mean, that's a long story. But the way of understanding a building that could be used for many things was also something that we had been kind of carrying out since long before in our studio. And I would say that the possibilities that we have had of doing single houses with much more kind of freedom of thought have allowed us to understand and think those possibilities for then when we arrive to more restricted conditions, we are able to test other things. No? To test what space does to social relationship, to test what space does to landscape, to test what space does to build the city. I have understood the hard way, that in the beginning I used to say, no, I'm not an urbanist, I'm an architect. I don't build a city, I just build little buildings. Every door that we design is defining the way the city is going to be built. So the way we are defining the relationship between the interior space and the exterior space is shaping a person and is shaping this citizen of any type of urban environment, and therefore we are building the city. This house, for example, has a kitchen that is mobile. So the notion of mobile kitchen already transforms the relationships that you have with the space and that the space has with the city. So I'm, again, not going to go deeply into that, but just that thought, put it in your mind, and I'm going to explain it a little bit further why. This house, we decided to have a very beautiful open kitchen. No? That's kind of the way that we went after understanding that if we talk in the kitchen, we just put in a person working there, a woman, and by opening to the social life of the family, then we're able to socialize the work. Well, that not only didn't help, because now it's the only thing is that there's the show of the women cooking, but nobody is helping in reality. But we are killing the possibilities of really making, of really holding buildings that hold possibilities for bodies to grow. So by putting vitamins and proteins in our bodies is really important. Yes, I know. But that's not how we eat. We eat flavors. We eat, and we eat culture, histories, love, care, a lot of different things that come not only with the fact that you eat a piece of meat, but the fact that you have embedded the way you cook this meat is the way you are able to kind of trespass all these things, culture, history, and sensations of place, of belonging, on many, many things that we also need to be nurtured. We don't only need vitamins and proteins. So this kitchen in a Mexican environment, it's killing totally that. And I'm guilty of it. We designed this kitchen. And this kitchen, you cannot do probably 99% of the Mexican food we eat every day. Because if you cook a salsa here, you will smell that salsa for the next year or so, even in your room. So you don't want to cook a salsa in this type of kitchen. You don't want to cook a mole. I mean, let's not go to the mole. I mean, that's completely forgotten. But not only a mole, you cannot even heat good properly a tortilla. And that's the base of our food. And we are killing the possibility of really supporting our culture because we are just repeating blocks from AutoCAD, you know, that have these stoves that can only serve the industry of the stoves, but they're not making anything for holding our bodies to exist. And I could describe the same thing about the kitchen in every space of the house, of the room, of the bathroom, of the living room. At the end, the most big problem is that if you put a 4-year-old to draw a house, they will draw these, but also someone in Sri Lanka, if you can ask them how to imagine a house, they're also imagining the same thing, or someone in New Orleans, or wherever in the world, it doesn't matter. We're repeating the same house throughout the world in our imaginaries and in our physical realms that do not support anything, in any case, our bodies or our minds or our spirits, less and less do our goods for our societies, our cultures, our cities. And this is why I call a lecture that I just do on housing, the fantasy of the house we live in. Because this house is supported on all these fantasies that we all never, no one of us did. And I think that one of the very important moments, key moments of our career was when we realized this, when we were helping rebuild houses in San Simón el Alto. This is a small community in the Estado de Mexico, in a state near Mexico City, who had an earthquake in 2017. 500,000 homes went down in 1/3 of the country. This was one of the towns that was hit. 1,000 homes in these towns were down. And what we decided was to go in and help rebuild. We understood very early on when the earthquake passed that the majority of these houses fell apart because 30 years before it was the NAFTA agreement was signed, and a pour of new materials, industrialized materials, arrived in little towns everywhere in Mexico, and people started to use them for many, many reasons. So that's another thing, you know, the imaginary of the modern world and acceding to the civilized life was to use industrialized materials. So cinder blocks were like kind of the thing, you know, that's the future and it's the progress. And progress came with no instructions. So these cinder blocks and steel bars and concrete that was poured in every town in Mexico were not, again, coming with instructions on how to be used safely and correctly to those materials. Nothing is correct and incorrect, we believe, but according to the use of those materials for those houses not to build, not to fall. So what we decided to go in is to say, okay, first of all, let's build these with the traditional methods. It's going to be easier, blah, blah, blah. And very soon these people told us, what are you talking about? I mean, we're rebuilding how we want on the cultural, social, and etc. aspects that we want. And that's it. So we realized that we really wanted to provide the knowledge that we had on the things that they would not have, but not on the things that they would have. So they knew exactly how to live, where to place the houses, how to rent them, where to open it, how to do it, how to not do it, but they didn't knew how to lay a cinder block on top of a concrete foundation, and that's how what we were given. We learn much more than they learn from us. And first of all, we learned that kitchens do not go inside because exactly of the same reason I said. They cannot imagine to be cooking inside any house because then they cannot cook the things that they cook. We learned very quickly that kitchens are not an individual act, they're a collective act. Everybody cooks. Not everybody. I mean, it's also run by women mostly, but they're powerful people on the town. But also, they're shared, and the labor is shared. Second, that thing that we learned is that there's not only one appliance to cook. There are many, 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 and they're very necessary to really be able to produce what they cook. So what we did next time, it was like, okay, how can we respond towards these conditions? There's the opportunity of working with the people, and these houses were designed by them. We didn't design the houses, but because we were there, we were able to communally then build those houses, help build those houses. But it's not always possible. So when we were called next time for a program in national government program for housing and housing models, we said, let's stop doing prototypes, housing models, and things that do not support people. So it's hard. I don't know if we had the answer, but what we tried here was to just design 3 modules that are different sizes, different openings, different materials, and they could be used by the people who and the way they accommodate their own way. So these modules can be arranged differently within a small lot. They can add more, they can add less, they can use it for a couple, for 3 generations. Each can get their own module. I mean, there's many, many different types of arrangements. And understanding that everybody lives different, how can you then create that? But also, we thought that this configuration also creates a different type of city, no? So we did this as a research project, and then it was built in one laboratory that the Infonavit made. It's a laboratory of housing, and the problem here is that every single of those 31, there were 32 with ours, houses were designed as houses. Ours was a system and was not a house. Being built as one of those 32 houses completely violates the whole design that we did. And that was exactly the point of us accepting it to build it, no? So we kept going and we did different strategies, but basically always trying to support the idea that everybody lives different. So how can we provide with tools that allow them to build safely, structures that hold, but that they can be built or could be built in whichever way. Possibly trying to hold many more forms of existing in this planet than the other houses do. I don't know, but I hope that they do. We started, as I said, doing these types of experiments. I mean, I've told these people that we're experiments, so don't worry. To erase kind of the most determinations we can. Architecture is a very determined and determinant act. It determines it determines first and gives the possibility to inhabit this planet, because otherwise without it we cannot live here. But also it's not only that, it's not as simple, it's not just a cave, no, it has a purpose and a meaning and a direction and a determination that if you add the cultural, social, historical capital values, then it really decides who can and who can't inhabit this planet. So what we tried in this case was to say, okay, architecture is determinant, and it needs to have a geometry. But if we add then the layers of the rest, no, the sizes, the specific sizes to a specific program, then we are even directing more the way someone lives. So here what we did is we cannot escape the geometry because that's how the space can be existing physically. So we designed this geometric module that multiplies and divides and spreads in the landscape, but doesn't have a label. So it's not, every space can be used as whatever or as not, as landscape or as house or as living or as whatever, but it's not really directed on how it should be used. Then we encountered the first problem. We had to deliver plans to the municipality of this house. And this could only, the municipality would only allow one house, and a house is composed, again, this is in Spain, but it's all over the world. It would not count as a house if it doesn't have a kitchen, a bathroom, a living room, 2 rooms, etc., etc. So how can we kind of even do plans that express our idea of really opening and not labeling spaces? We tried with representation. So we did these plans that are plans and sections and facades and models, because they fold. There's this butter paper, we cannot see them very well, but they fold, and in that they do not correspond. So to like kind of hinting that there's open possibilities of using these spaces. Never, that was accepted, but they were like, okay, now we need some images. And then we encountered the next problem, no? Images that we have been fighting for so long that determine how a space should be used or should be approached or should be seen or even should be photographed, as we have done in many, many ways, but we are in our office have challenged profoundly, then we had to use them. So then we said, okay, what we are going to do is we're going to put these blocks or squares in the landscape, and we're going to ask Gonzalo, a person in our office, okay, Gonzalo, this is your house, how would you live it? So we presented in the municipality saying, this is Gonzalo's house. This is not the house we're building, but this is Gonzalo's house. And they were still skeptical, the house has not been built. Let's see what happens then. We then, after that, we're called to work on a house called Ways of Life. And in this project, we were called, actually it was called New Ways of Life. And it was 20 architects that were called to design a house for the new ways of living. And this was 2017. And they were saying, okay, living and working in the same space is going to be the future for people living in urban spaces. So let's do houses for them. You know, already I described that I don't believe in that division, first of all, because we have been living and working in the same space since the start of humanity. And because the house is the far most important place of work, I don't believe in this division. But then we said, okay, let's design a house for ways of living. And instead of designing it with program, because obviously the brief asked for a house that had a kitchen, a bathroom, a living space, 2 rooms, and a working space, we decided to use those 6 spaces, but not labeling them, not describing them the way we describe the spaces as a kitchen, a bathroom, etc., but as what could be promoted on those spaces, and according to the relationship to the ground or to the light, they could exist or not exist. And then this was the first project that we used collage as a method of design. So we challenged the way of representing projects in many ways, and why we use collage, why we kind of arrived to the idea that collage was a correct word, is because I profoundly believe that a collage accepts the other in the drawing, and hopefully that is the way we are able to create buildings. So when you see an image, everybody, and I've tested this, believe me, it's true, everybody interprets it in its own terms. So this is already including you in the image itself. I hope that our architecture is able to be interpreted by anyone who uses it in their own terms, and not the way I imagined how to use it, how to use that, me or whoever has designed it. So in this case, we used collage. We said, okay, what if we use collage to design a building, and then with those values be embedded already in the beginning? So we tested, and we collaged the 6 spaces. Sorry that the architects that I've referenced in the images are not cited, but they, believe me, I know that when they are. I promise next time we show these images, there will be. But I think that the spaces, it was very hard already in the team to collage a space described with the words, because for all of us meant, each word meant different things. So already started to tell us something. But anyway, we finished the 6 collages, and we finished the 6 collages. We said, okay, now what? Now how do we design a house with these? We really didn't know much what to do, and we traced that those 6, we put them together, we traced them, and then we had 3 days to deliver, so we really had to do a house. And so we started shaping the house, and we arrived to a conclusion that I was very disappointed, I have to say, but we nevertheless had to present it, because I felt that we could have arrived to this same result, just saying, okay, let's do a house with a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 rooms, and that's it, let's go, let's present, and that would have been the result. But anyway, we just presented it. We didn't label any space, so not any space in this house is designed as a bathroom or as a kitchen. It's just spaces with different relationships, different openings, different materialities, different relationships within itself. And a year later, I got a call saying that there was a couple that saw this house and thought it was perfect for the way of living. And I was like, how come? Because we have not defined a lot this house. And then we never had a call with them, and they really described how to use this space in a completely different way as I imagined. So their intimate space, the most intimate space for them was, for me, the most exposed and non-intimate space, where I would put the most kind of linked space towards the outdoors and the collective. And they understood it as their intimate space. And this clearly told me that we do all live very differently, although I would say that those people and I could share a culture background, a form of living more or less. But no, they really interpret their way very, very different. We are building that house right now as we speak, and we'll see, maybe there is a house that holds different types of living. Let's see also in the future how it goes. After we designed that space, we were discussing at the same time. We had this commission in St. Louis, Missouri, where we were to do a block filled in with 20 houses. And the idea was to refill a block that was used residentially for 21 houses. But it was in the 50s and 60s was deoccupied, and then the buildings were torn down. This area of the city emptied pretty much. This phenomenon that happened in St. Louis, Missouri, the same as in Detroit, well, not the same, but it's similar process you might have heard of. This is kind of the archetypical block of that situation. So what we wanted is to think, okay, if we understand that even the way we place the door or the door in a room, in an intimate space, is defining the city. What is the city that we want to design for? So we understood that what we wanted is really to create these possibilities of different types of social relationship by design. So how to kind of understand the notion of the monastery in an extended way, where we could have intimate spaces that then are exposed to the more collective intimate spaces, to the more common public spaces of the block, and then those to the public spaces. So we designed a plan where these houses would never face the street, but would face different types of inner spaces, some more collective, some more common, and some more intimate, like a pool, for example, that is shared by the collective, a public park that is shared by the neighborhood, a more common space that is collected but small for smaller collective, or an intimate exterior spaces that are used kind of by one or by few, or a productive garden that is also kind of this space where it's both intimate collective for many, not only humans, but also others to use. And then we decided to invite 4 other different architects, 3 other different firms to each design a house. That was Moss from New York, Productora, that is both in New York and Mexico City, and Macias Peredo, which is in Guadalajara. And we all each designed one house, and then we decided to repeat those houses through the 21 with different conditions, little different conditions and relationships. Speaking only about our house very quickly, is because we thought that the understanding already of these kind of levels of scales of relationships that promote the space can also come from the house. So what we did is two rectangles that are shifted in order to kind of promote a more intimate space that and a more kind of collective experience on the bottom. This is under 18 houses are built. And 28, I think 14 are inhabited, and 21 is the goal. It is a very kind of particular project. We don't know how it would impact the rest of the construction of the neighborhood, but hopefully it starts with, you know, a seed of thinking how this could really enable different relationships than what the rest of the city promotes, not with a house just facing a yard and a street does. So, and we're trying to take those kind of experiments, let's say, but also possibilities in a more dense realm. We're recently working on a housing project in Monterrey, Mexico, and that it's being built actually of 150 units. So first of all, what we did is we broke the notion of the vertical shafts that are only serving installations, but sometimes they serve people as well, elevators and stairs, just straight, in order to really promote kind of different types of relationships in the horizontal realm and not only on the vertical, and thinking how to combine the programs that give birth to the possibility of different relationships, not only between the whole kind of 150 units, but breaking it to relationships of 4 units, of 6 units, clustering kind of rooms with no programs, but also open terraces, but also open possibilities for planting maybe, or whatever these people decide. As I said, kind of this is being built. The idea was also to extend the notion of the space, not programmed space. Let's see how this community unveils and understands itself. We're also challenging these notions with in Mexico City with reusing adaptive reuse of a building, but also kind of in trying to introduce spaces that are shared, that are a kitchen, a bathing space, kind of understandings of different types of spaces that can hold activities that are basic for reproductive labor. There's a childcare a room here, but also an elderly room that could be an elderly room. I mean, the community should program it. But we are encountering kind of the hard face of the law, because this is not a house described on the housing law of Mexico. So we are kind of halted with this project. But I think that there is a necessity of really pushing those boundaries. And I think that is our responsibility as architects, no? Doing one single project that challenges all these things is good, but it serves 10 people, 20 people. How can we then push the limits and take it, for example, to policy? That would be one thing, that would be one way. To take it also as a pedagogy, that could be another thing. What other things you think? That would be something that I would love you to take from this lecture, no? It's not only me trying to do those things. No? There are many examples around the world of people pushing the boundaries just because of one project. I can think of a very close example, because I know very well the people of La Col, for example, in Barcelona, who have done one building that had changed three policies in the city that are now changing the face of the housing system in Barcelona. So I think that if we think on a goal as architects, that would be, you know. we were called last year to do a project, and I promise I'll close soon so we can have time for questions. We were called to do a project in Columbus for this Exhibit Columbus program that happens every 2 years. There's a curatorial team that selects a group of architects that have to work under a theme. In our case was public by design. That was our topic, and the idea was that we should endeavor in designing something for this plaza designed by the public. We already knew the challenges and the difficulties of doing participatory design. I have a lot of my doubts on that. I always have had, because we have I understood that participation is not directly the possibility of people designing their own space. But we started and we demonstrated the correct way. So we talked to every single member of this community or every single group that represents this community in many different types of workshops and open calls and different ideas. And obviously we got as many people that was in, as many ideas on this plaza as we're in. Definitely an airport for dragons, that was one idea. A skate park was another idea. But then there were all types of creative ideas as a living space or whatever. How do you design a public space that should serve a community of 50,000 people that could serve 50,000 people? So it is impossible. It is not possible. So what we decided is to take elements from all those inputs that we got, and then understand how to create bookshelves, like bookshelves. This is a library, a public library. So inside you have these bookshelves, and everybody that takes a book really gets out something for itself, by itself, and that it's really feeling that it's a collective endeavor. So we did the same thing. We did these buildings, these bookshelves or shelves that hold different types of elements that were described in many of these conversations that we had, for people to then make their own plaza and possibility for the day. So we placed objects that were changing all the time, and that they were definitely used in many different ways for the community in many different days and possibilities. People were dressing the color of the furniture by chance. Really, I promise we didn't say this, but really people who wanted a living space use it as a living space. People who wanted a skate park use it as a skate park. People who wanted to have a dragon airport, I hope they imagined that they could be landing dragons there as well. But really, kind of taking to the limit what it means to be public by design, but in this case, designed by the public. And we have been trying to kind of push the boundaries of what means to do architecture, also by doing conversations, by meeting things. I'm not gonna stop in this project, but we did a lot of workshops around the notion of care, in this case, care for clothes. Talking with people, trying to engage people to produce thought and ways of thinking of these. I'm going to go quickly to the last two projects. It's a botanical garden that we've been doing for the last 20 years, June 2005, so almost 20 years. That is really the center of urban and social life of Culiacan, or one very important one that held already since we arrived huge activity of every kind, not only research-based, educational, recreational in this botanical garden, like local identification with your nature surrounding, but also really a place and a point of encounter for social activities, a place of representation. And what we needed to do is to how to intersect an architectural program for new space for holding a new activity, which is contemporary art. So the idea was very ambitious to introduce a very big, important collection of pieces that were specifically designed for the site, like this James Durrell Observatory, as big and impactful as this one, and to have an architectural response to hold these activities. How to introduce a building, because that was the first request, one building that could hold workshops and rooms for educational activities for kids, auditorium, library, exhibition room, blah, 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 but also offices, information booths, etc. And we decided to create a strategy of thinking on very small pavilions that could only enhance the possibility of this place and really understand the nature of it by and pinpointing the important points, like, for example, the irrigation system, which happens by gravity, but people didn't know, so why not exposing just that like that you can admire that. But by holding activities in small pavilions that always expose you to the notion that you are in a botanical garden, reminding you always that you are here in this place that is ruling kind of what happens and the experience, and not the other way around. So in our case, in this, the question here was, what is the architecture that holds the possibility of holding these activities for humans, but that the nature that surrounds is the one that rules here, and that we are only part of nature that need this structure to exist in this planet. So, and to do the activities here in this garden. I'm not going to describe in full each of the rooms, but this project is important for me to kind of give the introduction into the last one, because of course, those kind of ways and strategies that we placed for here were the ones that brought us to the next project. So this garden is in Culiacan. Culiacan is a city on the northwest of Mexico. It's the capital of the state of Sinaloa, which you might have heard, because the cartel of Sinaloa, led by El Chapo, yes, it's from this city, and right now it's under siege. It's a really sad situation. But really, the garden was trying to kind of promote the idea that this city is not only that, it's not only the cartel of Sinaloa's headquarters, it's really a city that has an incredible social and urban life. And so years later, 2016, we were called to Mazatlán, which is the second largest city of the state. It's larger in number of people, but it's smaller in every other number, economy, etc. Culiacan is the capital, and Mazatlán used to be in the 50s and 60s the most important tourist destination of Mexico, and it really became a tourist city, a city devoted to tourism. But little by little, 70s and 80s, it lost its charm because it became very big and it became a service city. In those moments, this central area of the city was held and protected to become a future park. It never became a park in full. It always had the name, but it had the name of Central Park, but it never became a park because they never had the money or the vision to figure out how to hold a social activity and this natural space that had a very specific condition, because it has a natural regulating lagoon that changes its level through the year. So what we were called in a moment where there was a private and public endeavor to define the use of this park and be able to produce it. And not only that, they had the ambition to have two very big pieces of infrastructure on it, which was a museum and an aquarium, that we were not part of it. So we designed the park, and we designed it with the aim of holding these three kind of conditions of the park, and to promote the social activity of it within its natural condition. So there's the areas where are flooded the whole time, areas that are flooded and not flooded depending on the time of the year, and areas that are dry all the year. And I think this plaza that is in the park shows very well how we did these strategies. We wanted really to understand how to promote the possibility of social use when nature changes so dramatically. In places in the world, California is not the best example, but it's still like you feel the seasons pass. In other places, it's very direct, no? You have the seasons directing how you use public space. It's already a given. But in Mazatlan, there's not. People think there's only one season, which is hell because it's very hot. But there is a change of seasons, no? And the water clearly tells us how the season changes. So we wanted to take the opportunity of creating a space that is used very differently throughout the year. And when we started really putting in place our plan, for this park and consolidating this park, the first part was to clean the lagoon, because it was completely polluted by the buildings that you see facing the sea. The back of the buildings where they throw the sewage was the lagoon. So we started cleaning it and consolidating the pedestrian walkways around it and many, many things around the plan, when we were approached by the same people promoting these, saying that they wanted us to participate in designing the aquarium. The aquarium had already a design, because they didn't like the design they have. It didn't look like an aquarium. So when they arrived to the office saying that they had an aquarium that doesn't look like our aquarium, I said, well, I have a deeper problem with what you're saying, because I don't believe in aquariums. Aquariums, for me, are those representations of the man controller of the universe, very much what this mural from Diego Rivera done in 1933 in the Rockefeller Center in New York, which was later erased and then repainted in Bellas Artes in Mexico City, is telling us, we believe, men believe, that we control the universe, and the aquariums are those things. We cannot get into this world, so why don't we bring it to us? Because we're so powerful that we can do that, and that is how we displayed it. And then we fantasize about this world. It's never something that really relates you, that brings you to the relationship with that world. But I think that the worst is the belief behind, is believing that we really can control the universe, or even taking it further, we understand we don't. We even think that we're destroying the planet. We're not destroying anything. The planet is not going anywhere. The planet is staying put. We are being expelled from the planet. Already many species were expelled, the dinosaurs and its fellows. We don't know why. They probably also were bad inhabitants. But we are being expelled, unfortunately, with some other species, because we have not been able to understand that we are not different from nature. We are nature, and that we are part of this ecosystem that very much needs us, and we need it in order to exist. So when I said that, and I said, well, and the second most important problem that I have is that you want to build an aquarium when you have 100 meters from that. You want to build an aquarium with penguins when you have 100 meters ahead of you, the most important aquarium of the world, which is the Sea of Cortez. I don't think why would you build an aquarium? So then they said exactly that's what we want. We want a building that really becomes the social possibility of the link with our surrounding, with our own ecosystem, and our own ecosystem also includes the Sea of Cortez. We don't have a single structure and a single understanding of the life inside there, besides the tourist realm that we have outside here. So how can we create an institution like that? Then I said, okay, we're talking business. And we were able to team with people who had really done spaces that are holding marine life in order for us to relate to this space. And not only socially, but also educationally, but also research-wise, but also protected-wise. And we invited Oceanwise, which is the organization that runs the Vancouver Aquarium, and that really has created a program and an institution for 60, 70 years that is holding the possibility of the wildlife and the marine wildlife in British Columbia, but also we team with people that have worked in the Monterey Aquarium and people that really understand how to sustain a space that is this, no, the linkage between us and our own ecosystem. So what is then a building that looks like an aquarium like that? That was the first question when after we understood the institution that we were building, we couldn't imagine one. So we thought that we arrived in the year 2289 to a building that had been built in the year 2023. We don't know the program that the building had, but what we know is that in the year 2100, the building was flooded because the water rised, the sea rose, and then the water receded because it was cyclical. And when it receded, it was able to kind of unveil the light that had took over this building. And we arrived only in the moment when it dried, but the life was still kind of dominated in this ruin, and we created these two very big steps that bring you to the roof to see the wildlife that was able to survive within this ruin, and then a very big central stair that brought you in this central space that allow you to kind of understand what happened inside this building. So the project was really designed this way. This was the first meeting with the person behind the project. I told this story that he was totally like speechless. He couldn't believe his life that he was listening to me saying this. A day after he was fine and he called me, okay, then I understood this is like the Atlantida, let's do it. So anyway, this building was really designed as a ruin that was able to hold all this life for all these years. And it was being built from 2020 to early 2020. Yes, we had the pandemic in between, to 2023. It was open to hold life in many regards since May 2023. And since then, it has held 1.5 million humans. And hopefully very soon it holds 1.5 million other organisms, but it still holds a lot of them. And I don't know about you, but I will be there in the year 2289. Let's see what life was able to subsist by them in this building. And I think that with this, I can end up this lecture, and I hope we can open a little bit. We still have time for questions from all of you. Thank you so much.
We'll take some questions if we'd like to have a discussion. Thank you so much, Tatiana. Beautiful lecture. And no, that's okay. The way that you framed architecture as this geometric process that frames and distills and registers nature and human ritual and culture, these very fluid things. Could you speak to that? Maybe just one that is a theme throughout the work from the very beginning of this way that architecture frames nature, frames cultural ritual, they're very open, very precise and very open.
So architecture is the medium for us to be able to inhabit this land. And I like to think of it as a medium and not as a limit, and not as a structure, and not as anything else but a medium. So for me, the way it all starts is thinking on the organisms that have been held or will be held. Therefore, the histories, the stories, the experiences. And yes, the geometry is definitely the possibility of it to exist physically, But for me, it's a tool, it's not a way of starting. So we don't start with lines and squares in any type. We don't talk about proportions or aesthetic definitions until very last. We tell very much about, we start very much about stories, conversations, possibilities, and experiences, and then is when we start using geometry and aesthetic tricks, but that they all respond to these, no? I believe that one of the things that is really, really necessary when we are trying to think on the built environment is how to understand that architecture is absolutely determinant and determined. There's nothing else we can do about it, but that holds the ever-changing process, which is life, no? Or that is held on top of an ever-changing process that is life. Our bodies change every day, and the architecture can't. So how can these two things need to coexist? And with those spaces, how can we provide possibilities, better possibilities for those? It's always a question about work.
Yeah. Ginger minutes.
Thank you so much for the lecture. It was really, really fascinating. And I have two questions. I hate to monopolize time, so maybe I'll cut me off, or you can just choose to answer whichever one's more interesting. But the first is simply that in hearing you talk about your process going back and forth with clients, is that you're not a very obedient architect. And it's very interesting because, you know, I think we're trained as architects, first of all, to feel ashamed, right? If we're being the arrogant architect, right? And second, I think we often train our students to be good professional architects is to interpret a program as it's given to you, right? So I just wanted, that was one question. We could talk a little bit about that. And if that took courage, and if there is points in your career, like, you know, at what point you felt like you could assert yourself like that. But the second question has to do, because you showed such a wealth of different tools of representation and design with different materials for your models and the collaging, which you mentioned briefly, and you talked about hand drawing. And I was just wondering, like, when you do the, was it public by design by public, or like, how do you think about representation tools when you're working with a public that's not trained professional?
Well, the first one, yes, I'm not an obedient architect. But I'm not an obedient person. I mean, my nature is to question everything. I'm even questioning every day my own self. That's the first thing I question. My husband always says, Tatiana, come on, stop it there. You're killing yourself. You're just think every time you do something, you're like, oh, I was wrong because I should have done this. But I think that is a possibility for me. And when he said that, I kept thinking, and then I thought, no, I'm never going to give up that, because that has given me the tools of really being able to open many, many things for me. And although I'm not a very obedient person, I don't know how I have handled the way that people think I'm a very obedient architect. You could ask the people who have worked with me, they're like, oh yeah, that's super flexible. No, there's really a thing that probably I'm not obedient in the base, but when you are opening conversations, like you put the first image, a story, such a fantastical story, you're opening for so many things, conversation, that everything is allowed. After I came with a client saying, we found a building that it's in ruins in the year 2289. No, so then everything can happen in that conversation. And then often, obviously, it's a negative reaction. As I said, like the faces of these guys going out of my office, and they were like, "Oh," I was like, "Okay, we're not gonna do this." But then, you know, day after it happened. But I mean, that's normally what happens. No, that people start to feel angry or you know, uncomfortable, and those feelings are good. I mean, conflict is what builds possibility, no? So that's what we do. And then the collage is exactly that. They do that, no? They create and they provoke conflict. And then they they open many possibilities. And a collage, as I said it in the lecture, no, it's an image that is never finished, that is open to interpretation, and that is open to also of this destruction, let's say. No, I see collages and I think, oh, I would take this out, I would put this in, and a lot of our minds do the same, or I would put these, oh, but I believe these, no, but it's still, every person is different, so that is the way you're included in the collage, and that's the way you're included in the conversation, and it works. So it is kind of answering the two questions in one, because it is one.
Fantastic, thank you, Tatiana. I had a thought, just listening to you, right? And the thought is, product is not the project, because the project is the process.
Yes.
That's the kind of my reaction.
Good point.
And it's also then, once we decide that, right, it's also then the question of the sensibility of the process, the documentation of the process, and maybe even the ability to represent the process, right? And that's what really struck me about your talk, because let's say someone of your stature as an architect would show images, build the building, but you don't do that. You're kind of like taking us through, because if you just show buildings, that wouldn't be the project, right?
Definitely, and I also think that the product is not the project, the same way the process is not the end. So we're just the participants of a very small part of the process that hopefully is transformed and be transforming all the time, and that continues to be a process every time. So for us, that is important. So I remember the first times that I was met with a client who was, Tatiana, you have to give us a manual of instructions on how to use this building. I'm like, why? Yes, because we also, what can we change? How can we change? Where do we buy the lamps? I'm like, no, this is exactly not, no? The moment where this building is being kind of, the conversation that I started has been put out there. I hope it really enriches and grows and goes beyond the places where I could even have imagined. So there is really no intention of thinking how these buildings would be in the future or how it can be used. It's a difficult thing to say, but it's really true, no? I mean, if this aquarium really is taken by I don't know, coffee grounds, or whatever, or office people for an office. That's what it is,
The back. Yeah.
Ya, mía.
Please.
¿Qué tal? Buenas noches, arquitecta. Mi nombre es Joan, del
Hola,
estado de
Joan.
Hidalgo, México.
Mucho gusto.
¿Qué tal? Mi pregunta va enfocada a cuál considera que es la relación directa del éxito y desarrollo profesional de un arquitecto, tomando como base la universidad donde estudió, y si considera que esta repercute en las relaciones sociales y conexiones futuras del arquitecto en cuestión. Es decir, considera que un arquitecto que egresa de universidades no tan reconocidas o no tan famosas, pero obviamente que se enfoque y busque su crecimiento profesional acercándose al campo, entre otras cosas, pueda tener las mismas posibilidades y situaciones laborales de alguien que egresa del Ibero, del TEC, de la NAWAC, o considera que sí depende mucho de dónde te desarrolles escolarmente hablando. What is the relationship between the university and the development of the architect career?
But I was going to translate, but you didn't, he resumed in English very much what he asked. So I believe profoundly there is still a very direct relationship, and that's a pity. Definitely, one of the people in Mexico regard me, as the woman architect, and it's like, you look again at changing the pace of the architecture. I'm not, in truth, because I come from a place of a lot of privilege. I was educated in a very prestiged institution. I arrived to the professional field at a perfect moment because women were already needed in my social environment. Women were already there and were regarded. But then really there, I realized, it's like, it's not true. It's true for me, but only me. So my real task is not to be the women architect example for people who are already in Libero, because those people have the same opportunities I do. And it's pretty true, not completely, and there's luck in between, but pretty much, no? I need to be doing architecture or policy making or educating in places where really people do not have those opportunities. I'm still working on it. I fail in many regards in that place, but that's the only way we can, I want to include everybody, and it's by doing all these things at the same time. It's a big task, but it is true that it's not the same for everybody.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So I can't remember if it was a year or two ago, maybe it was this year, but in your lecture at Yale, you started off with a slide that said something that fundamentally redefined how I viewed architecture, which was architecture as a colonizing act. And today you didn't describe it as a colonizing act, but a deterministic act. And I'm curious if the change in wording is intentional, why it changed, and if it wasn't intentional, like how do we reconcile with that? Or like, should we even reconcile with that? Or should we just accept it and just like go and all be colonial architects?
Architecture is a colonizing act, definitely. I didn't say that word today just because I said different things, not on any purpose and intention, so you shouldn't think differently. It is a colonizing act, no? It imposes a way of use to the ground that it's embedded in, point zero. That only physical act of building something into the ground, it's colonizing that ground. If you embed with that notions of culture, politics, capital, etc., then the stages of colonialism grow, no? So we have to really think, how are we going to use that colonizing act, which is unescapable, in order to really provide that possibility that maybe expands the options and the offers of that ground, no? And not the other way around. So to eliminate the possibilities and the options of the use of that ground. That is kind of the surrounding of that thought.
Hi, Tatiana. Thank you for the lecture. I wanted to ask about when you were talking about helping the communities rebuild. It's kind of been a topic that has been coming up in sort of lectures and meetings recently for me, and kind of stuck to me is that there's a notion in these communities of what they want to develop or redevelop or rebuild, and you were pushing also for not determining the program. And how do you wrestle those two things, sort of helping them rebuild what they want, but also not pushing forward and building something to be interpreted by them, while sort of conforming to government and policy?
First of all, everybody knows how to inhabit the planet. That's a basic necessity we have. We all know. The problem is that we have been trained to think that we don't, that somebody else is the one that knows. So by really giving the grounds and the platforms of the possibility of expression of everybody, and to really allow themselves to make a reflection on how that they do know how to inhabit, that's already a big thing that we could do as architects, no? First of all, to recognize, be very humble and recognize that we don't know how they inhabit. We don't know. First of all, we don't know, but we don't have the right to decide how they inhabit. And that's more important, no? But in school they teach us, I'm sorry for your, but they teach us that we should know how others should inhabit this planet. And so I think that the first notion is to recognize that we don't know how anybody else lives in this planet. So how can we immerse ourselves in the system of production of space that it really holds into the collective knowledge of space? So it is difficult, it's not a direct answer. We have been doing a lot of experiments, and that is how we do, no? So in the case of San Simón de las Dos, they really knew perfectly how they were going to build, how they inhabit, how were the spaces that they wanted to have, and that they had, or that they proved to be good, or that they wanted to have. And what we only sat there and provide was the knowledge that they were hesitating on understanding or knowing, which is the use of these new materials, no? In this case was that, but in other cases, in other communities, could have been otherwise, no? So it's really trying to understand yourself, where are you serving the community and not the other way around, no? Not the community serving your purpose.
Hi. So the modules you present, they were sort of like blank slates for people to have it however they want. But they were very limited in scale, where multiple modules made up like one living space. I guess my question is, could you see a sort of more of the, I guess, city scale version of that, where multiple people have the one module, but could those modules still sort of promote the same amount of individuality as the sort of scaled down modules, or would it be more in line with the sort of copy-paste housing that you were talking about?
Absolutely, I would not like to see that at all, you know? I mean, in this case was a possibility for people who really need the system to produce a platform for them. Because there's a lot of people who do not have the possibility or the opportunity of even having their voice heard on how to inhabit, no? But hopefully this is a system for those who, only those who need it, and that not everybody, no? And needed in a very specific condition, in a very specific way of living. In this case, was even designed for a very specific location in Hidalgo. It's not radically designed for everybody. So no, I don't imagine. I hope there's not a city like that. I hope there's a city of blank spaces that everybody takes them on itself, but not squares and much like this.
Maybe we take a couple more questions. I saw one here and I saw one here. Any others that are still? Oh my gosh. Okay. It's a couple. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your lecture. So I'm in a class right now where we're talking about kind of the great houses around here in LA. But obviously a parallel concept is housing. So I enjoyed all the kind of housing discussions that you presented, especially kind of all of your takes on how deterministic that can be. And I think that's a really good word for it. So I also really enjoyed all that kind of maybe the good ambiguity you left in some of the representation. What I'm curious about, though, is I think in a lot of the historic discussions I've been reading on sort of equitable spaces and such, the inevitable private versus public comes up. In thinking this question through, I guess I'm really curious as to any patterns you've observed with that and what seems like a happy medium, maybe. Obviously, leaving things open for people to kind of determine their own rhythms in that. But I guess, how do you approach design in thinking about that private versus public and like a housing space?
You mean private housing, like with private money, and public housing?
Oh, sorry.
Public.
I guess privacy versus sort of the public space.
Okay. So I think that and I said it like the independence of the very specific houses, private houses, you know, that have these possibilities of allowing us to play with many topics, because it's also for a very good individual, allows to understand their strategies that we could extract and apply otherwise in a more in a different environment, more collective wise, no? So I think that your example of if I'm understanding well the question, your example, you are looking at these historical houses could serve for that purpose, no? What are the things that you could extract from these? And a lot of these houses, I don't know which ones you're visiting, but a lot of these houses are already questioning, you know, the notion of the bathroom as box, no? Or of the kitchen as a determined space, or as, you know, as many of these things. So how can you think of that on a larger realm from this kind of what you could extract, you know, and possibilities not only for the very specific person that is there, but more open, you know, opening more questions for everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the lecture, and big fan. I have a question and a gift for you.
Oh.
So the question is, is there a pivotal moment in your life that made you want to become an architect?
That's a very good question. If I answer the question, I get gifted. No. I think when I went out of school, I was pretty sure that I was not going to be an architect, and the reason was because half of my family are architects. And I really made everything. I even went into study design, industrial design, to not be an architect. But when I finally decided to be an architect was when I was living in Italy, and I decided to be helping many nights my housing colleague, where I would live with this girl that was doing a master's in architecture. And then I said, okay, yeah, this is me. I really like architecture. I mean, and I called my dad. It's like, you know what? I knew my dad was kind of, it was a little bit military education, so I thought he was going to be very mad at me that I again wanted to change. And he said, you know, Tatiana, I think you have it in your blood. And it's true. I think I was an architect since I was very little. I was very conscious about space that I lived in and what it did to me. Very, very conscious. I mean, now that I'm an architect and I'm thinking on my childhood, I understand that. Obviously, then I wasn't understanding that. And so yeah, I think I had it in my blood. I always wanted to be an architect. I just didn't want to recognize that because I didn't want it to be the same thing as my family was.
Thank you.
Did I answer?
Should I give this after?
Do I get the present?
Yeah, you answered the question, you get the present.
Thank you. Oh, wow.
This is a thank you letter.
Oh, wow. I can't believe, ooh, wow.
So this is, I'm from San Diego, and then we have a grant right now, which is called Temporary Paradise, which talks about Tijuana and San
wow.
Diego's border and how the designs connect together.
Oh,
And it's also related to reimagining the region, the book,
yes.
and it's relating to it. So I
Oh,
thought I'd
thank
give
you
this.
so much. Thank you, Charlie. This is
Thank
very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Wow. I can't thank you.
Anyone else have a gift? I think maybe we'll end it there, and I just wanted another round of applause for Tatiana.